Shalom, and welcome to Torah, Jewce. I'm Joshua, and it's presented by Kehillah El Elyon. And we are going to get back into talking about Torah portions and the Parsha for the week. I know we're kind of a week behind, but with the holidays and everything, things get a little crazy around here. So, so I apologize for not getting this out in a more timely manner, but we're going to talk about Bereshit, okay? Bereshit or Genesis. I prefer not to use the Greek terms for the books of the Hebrew Bible, the Torah. But for those who may not know what Bereshit means, it means in the beginning, but that is the book of Genesis. And actually the very first Parsha, the weekly Parsha, is Bereshit. Imagine that. Okay, so in the beginning. There are just so many things here between chapters 1 and chapter 6. We just don't have the time to really convey everything that's in there. So we'd like to take a little piece here and there. So now we're going to talk about stringencies. You go, well, what is a stringency? Stringencies would be something that is placed upon you by yourself or by a leader, let's say a pastor, a rabbi, someone who has made up a fence, if you will, around the Torah commandment, a mitzvot, to either protect somebody from doing it or to help beautify, to fulfill the Torah. Okay? Let's talk about this for a little bit. Some of you have the conception that all of the rabbinical injunctions and rabbinical traditions are wrong, and they are horrible and they're terrible, and Jesus came and he preached about, you know, the negative, the oral tradition, the oral law, the Talmud, and how it was just terrible and bad. That's wrong. It's just plain simple wrong. In fact, Yeshua himself made stringencies, made fences. Kind of interesting as well. Why would he do that? Well, he's a rabbi. And he's trying to protect people from falling into sin. And when you do that, when you try and protect people from sin, you put up boundaries around them. Sometimes the sin is it's very easy to commit, so you want to keep people a good distance away from the sin so they don't commit it. Like a parent. Let's say you have an outlet. Your little child likes to stick things in the outlet. You don't want the child to get electrocuted. What do? You put plugs in there. Well, if he's like my son was, or your child is like my son was, he learned how to pull those out the first day. Then what do? Well, you have to teach him no. You have to teach him no. And then what if he doesn't listen then? Well, then you have to figure out some way to cover it up to keep him away. You have to keep some kind of boundary to keep him away from that. That's called a fence. Okay? Why do we keep our dogs in our yards and not from running around? We build a fence. How do we keep our sheep and goats and cows and things like that from getting in other people's stuff? We build a fence to protect other people and ourselves. Stringencies. However, there's a danger in stringencies. Stringencies in and of themselves are fences of the Torah, rabbinical injunctions, if you will, are not necessarily bad unless you miss the intent of what the stringency is put there for, and you hold the stringency in higher regard than the commandment from Hashem. Then we have an issue. Then we have put man's words and doctrines and interpretations on a much higher level than what Hashem gave us. Now remember, Hashem is a perfect God. He gave us his perfect law. He gave us his perfect Torah. He gave us the prophets with perfect instructions and guides to our lives. We don't want to sin against Hashem. The first level we don't want to sin is because we're afraid. We don't want to be punished. That's a beginning level of Torah observance. You obey out of fear. And as you grow, you begin to obey out of love. And that's the key. All right? There's an interesting thing about stringencies. Who do you think was the first one in the entire Torah, maybe in the entire world, since creation, to put the first fence around the Torah? Do you have any idea? May not be a fair question, but this is kind of how it occurs to me. This is my interpretation. It was Eve. It was Chava. You say, what? What did Eve do? What fence did Eve build around the Torah? Well, let's take a look. Let's look in the book of Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 3. Hashem tells them. First off, he's telling them about what's going to... Let me make sure I'm in the right section here. All right, here we go. Sorry, chapter 2. All right, chapter 2. He tells Adam in chapter 2, verse 15, Hashem, God, took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and guard it. And Hashem, God, commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may eat freely, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you must not eat thereof, for on that day you eat it, you will surely die. That's pretty clear, isn't it? That's pretty clear. So your mind's probably working, well, wait, what did Eve say? What did she say that would have put a fence around this? Now, this is the law we're talking about. Hashem gave us a very specific commandment to Adam. He said, don't eat of the tree of the fruit, or the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But all the other trees you can eat, especially of the tree of life. You live eternally. What fence did Chava put up? Chapter 3. Now the serpent was cunning beyond any beast of the field that Hashem had made. He said to the woman, did perhaps Hashem say, you shall not eat of any tree of the garden? The woman said, this is Eve, of the fruit of any tree of the garden we may eat. Of the fruit of the tree which is in the center of the garden, Hashem said, you shall neither eat of it nor touch it, lest you die. Whoa. Neither eat of it nor touch it. Wait, is that what Hashem told Adam? Let's go back. Verse 16, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but verse 17, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you must not eat thereof, for on the day you eat it you shall surely die. Hashem didn't say you couldn't touch it. He said don't eat it. Then the serpent came and he says, Eve, he's just, he's sly, he's very cunning, he's the smartest. He goes, did Hashem say you could eat of all the trees? No. He said we could eat of all the trees, but of the one in the center of the garden, the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, he said we shouldn't eat of it or touch it. There's the first fence. There's the first fence. She put a fence around the commandment. Don't eat it. Don't even touch it. You could go even further. Don't even look at it. Okay? You can continue to build fences and fences and fences, right? This is kind of interesting. When I was doing a study about this, Rabbi Chia is a rabbi of the Talmud, commentator. He says the serpent called Eve a liar. What? He called well, I'm reading this. It doesn't, it doesn't say, he doesn't flat out call him a liar, but he says in verse 4, chapter 3, he says, you will not surely die, for God knows that on the day you eat, your eyes will be open, you will be like God, knowing good and bad. He doesn't challenge the touching part, but in the Midrash, it tells us in Bereshit Rabbah 19:4, he says that, thus the Holy One, blessed be He, said, for on the day that you eat of the tree you shall surely die. Whereas she did not say this, she rather said, you shall not eat or touch it. When the serpent saw her lying, he took her and he thrust her against the tree and the fruit, and then says, have you died? Did you die? Just as you were not stricken through touching it, so you will not die when you eat it. Do you see what happened? So Rabbi Kia says, we must not make the fences around the Torah more than the principal thing, the commandment. Because then what happened? Keep reading. The woman perceived that the tree was good for eating. She looked at the tree and she saw that it was good. Wait a second. Maybe she'd build a fence of not seeing it, but she didn't. And that it was of delight to the eyes. So she chased after her eyes. She didn't guard her eyes. And was desirable as means to wisdom, and she took it and she ate. do not make the stringency or the fence more important than the principal issue. Rabbi Kia taught that if you do, the fence will fall and destroy the plants. Basically what he's saying is, if you make the fence around the Torah more important, a man's doctrine, a man's injunction, a man's interpretation more important than what the Torah says itself, that the fence itself will fall and crush the people, will crush the plants. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Hashem made it very, very clear to us what we're to do and not to do. Does it mean fences can't help people? They obviously do. We have to protect people. But we don't make those the most important thing. We don't humiliate people because they may not have the knowledge of kashrut, by not letting them eat, or by not, by lording something over them. We don't do that. We shouldn't do that, I should say. That's not our place. We should help them. We just don't have to eat. We don't have to eat it. We don't have to lord it, and we don't have to, humiliate them. That's one of the fundamental things we're not supposed to do, is humiliate other people. We help them with love, not by pointing out faults and judgment all the time. Because we have enough of our own issues that we need to take care of. That's the key. So let's not make the fences more stringent or more important than the principle. Doesn't mean fences aren't important. It doesn't mean fences are evil. It doesn't mean that the rabbinical injunctions are bad. It's when they take over the point of the true principle. And Yeshua speaks of this very clearly when he says, you must be more righteous than the Pharisees. Do what they do, but they don't do what they do. Because they do it on the outside, but on the intent, they don't have the right intent. Now, don't get me wrong. It's only a small group of Pharisees. This is a small group of Pharisees that were trying to gain power. This was not the large group of righteous Torah leaders during the Second Temple time. And there was a lot of them. It's a small group of men who had lost their way. And I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I'm just saying that we have this thought, and it's been perpetrated throughout the church, that all Pharisees are bad. Wrong. Wrong. Paul was a Pharisee. Yeshua was a Pharisee. What problem do you have with that? So not all Pharisees are bad. And that's not just two. There were lots of them who guarded the Torah and taught people with love and kindness, and there are plenty of records of them and what they do. There's a small group that was controlled by the Romans and controlled by Herod. And that's where that came from. So, don't let the fences be more important than the Torah. But fences can help us and protect us from sin. Just keep it in perspective. Keep it where it belongs. If you study your Torah, then you'll know, and you'll say, here's the fence, here's the principle. I'm going to stay on this side of the fence because I don't want to even get close. Not only do I not want to touch it, but maybe I don't even want to look at it, because if I look at it, then I'll want to touch it, and if I want to touch it, then I'm going to want to taste it, and if I want to taste it, then I'm going to sin. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you a little bit with Bereshit. See you next time for Parsha Noach. Shalom Uvracha.